All right, welcome back to another edition of Uncommon Entrepreneurs Lunch and Learns. I'm here with the wonderful Melissa Jun Rowley. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Excellent. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Just to give you guys some background, if you're not familiar with Melissa, we're out here in beautiful Villa Vista in Mayajuez, which is connected to like Homebase, interesting startup and kind of like a co-living community type concept that we've been hanging and chilling at for the last period of time and all that. So to get into Melissa's background, she's worked on the forefront of tech, media, and social change as a prominent writer, entrepreneur, and speaker, as a contributor for BBC News and Forbes. She covers the business and technology and entrepreneurship sectors. She's also the founder of Warrior Love Productions, a content strategy and production house developing media projects designed to foster cross-cultural understanding and collaboration. For over a decade, she's produced storytelling strategies for clients, including global brands, startups, and venture capital firms with more than $23 billion in assets under management. A passionate advocate for promoting peace through entrepreneurship, Melissa launched the accelerator Resolve, which coached entrepreneurs in Lebanon to incorporate sustainable and positive impact into their operations and offerings. Prior to co-founding Resolve, she built the humanitarian tech platform, the Toolbox, with legendary musician Peter Gabriel. On camera and online, Lisa has hosted a series of events at the United Nations, the Super Bowl, and a number of interactive shows. In her early careers as a TV producer at CNN and the Associated Press, she flew in a zero-gravity NASA and produced business news segments from the New York Stock Exchange and interviewed entertainment luminaries at the Emmys, the Grammys, the global Golden Globes, and Oscars. Quite a mouthful of background, but it gives a lot of perspective into the lens that you've seen over the years. So I'm excited to get into this conversation. Maybe to fill in the blanks, we're sitting here in sunny Puerto Rico. Maybe what's your background? How'd you make it here? And start with that.
Yeah, so I'd say for most of my adult life, I was flying a lot between New York, LA, and San Francisco, working in television. And in 2010, I started my own business, my own content strategy business, developing storytelling strategies for companies. And I really didn't have a vision for that when I did it. I did it out of sheer desperation. The recession was happening, and I was a freelance producer for CNN at the time, having the time of my life, interviewing celebrities at the Oscars, Golden Globes, movie premieres, going to visiting sets, having a great time in Los Angeles. That was a really fun chapter and a crazy time. And then the work was just drying up. The well was drying up. And then pretty soon the economy was in recession. I had no idea what to do. I moved to San Francisco, lived on my best friend's couch for 6 months. I nearly had to file for bankruptcy.
Wow.
And then there were people around me saying, why don't you start your own business? I said, I have no idea how to do that. I'm just a journalist. I don't know. I'm a starving journalist. That's my identity. And things started to really shift when I began meeting really brilliant entrepreneurs in the Bay Area and in different parts of the world who were harnessing technology for social impact. This was when everything was location, mobile, and social. Was it LOSO-MO or something? That was the acronym that was going LOSO-MO or something like that. But I started learning about that, writing about that, making $15 for blog posts. Wow. So I obviously wasn't really making a living. I was still living on my best friend's couch. And then I got offered a job at E! Entertainment down back in Los Angeles. So I didn't want to leave San Francisco. I was kind of developing my community there, but I needed a real job. So I packed everything I owned in my Ford Mustang again, drove back down to Los Angeles, signed a lease on an apartment I could not afford, and started to drive to do the morning show every day. The show got canceled 3 weeks later.
Wow.
So I was really like shit out of luck. And I talked to my parents and they said, you're going to have to file for bankruptcy. We can't help you. And that's when I started the business, the content strategy business. I struggled really badly for the first few years because a lot of my my clients were nonprofits or startups which I really love working with those kind of organizations the most because of the heart and soul and the commitment they make to their mission. But a lot of times startups that are just starting out, they lose funding. The first thing to go is their content or their marketing or their storytelling, right? They don't have time for that. They need to build the business and get investors and build the product. And so they hire people like me to do their storytelling.
Yeah.
But then, I'd say 5 years in, I started to get bigger clients, really large global brands, big investors. And through having the flexibility of being an entrepreneur and being able to work anywhere in the world, I started traveling on my own to different countries to learn about their tech for good ecosystems. And I put those stories into my own personal brand that I've been cultivating over the years as a journalist, where the intersection is tech, social impact, and global entrepreneurship. And everything really the most recent years has been around breaking down cultural borders through spotlighting innovators around the world. Then I lived in London for a couple of years and decided to move back to the States to be closer to my family when my father found out he had lung cancer. He's in good health now. But I really didn't have a home. I was wandering, thinking about San Francisco again. I've lived in New York 3 times, can't live there again full time. Love the city, I just can't be there full time. I start to become really angry and aggressive when I'm in New York long term. And so then I thought about LA. None of these cities were sitting with me. They weren't resonating with me. And I came to San Juan, Puerto Rico on a long weekend vacation in July. And by the second night, I decided to move here. And it was really because I just felt like the energy and the atmosphere was calm and healing. I loved the community of mainlanders I met. I loved the community of locals that I met. I only met a handful of people, maybe 10 people that weekend, but I just said, I'm just gonna move here. And 2 months later, I made the move.
That's amazing. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't know a lot of that.
No, a lot of it's new, which is, it's good to kind of get that context.
Yeah.
And so what is Puerto Rico meant for you? How, somebody that's maybe, you have a unique perspective too after your time, but.
Yeah, I've only been here about 7 to 8 months so far, but in that 7 to 8 months, things have happened. We had a series of earthquakes happen in January, and there's still tremors because of the tectonic plates just being at battle with each other.
Yeah.
So people in the West and the South are still feeling that. I haven't heard any reports recently, but I think tremors are still happening. And, now with the pandemic, obviously, small mom and pop businesses are closing, everything's going online, people are going hungry all over the world. But I would say my main commitment and what's keeping me in Puerto Rico is, in addition to friends and community with people like you and people that really want to make a positive impact in their community, I feel like there is, I've seen so many amazing people here with a lot of ingenuity and drive. And I don't think that gets enough attention from outside of this island. A lot of the news that I saw about Puerto Rico before I moved here was emphasizing the natural disasters or the corruption or the crypto community.
Yeah.
And the crypto community, I'm glad it's here. It's brought attention to Puerto Rico. But in addition to that, there are a lot of other things happening. In addition to the tax incentives, there's a lot of things happening. And there are entrepreneurs coming out of programs like Parallel 18 and other accelerator programs here. And I think that because of the ability of the people of Puerto Rico to adapt, because they don't know any other way, resilience is just kind of a lifestyle for people in Puerto Rico and other countries I've been to. That to me never stops being fascinating, because that means the innovation, the creativity that's coming out of it is going to keep evolving and changing over time. I mean, I have nothing against Silicon Valley. I lived there, but I don't need to see another mobile app that tells me where to take my dog to take a walk. I don't need, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, everything, we create things based on the demand of our customers that we're seeing the opportunity, and the demand, there's more demands in the world beyond commercial, and I think that there are ideas all over the world in different startup ecosystems that can be replicated in other parts of the world, or that could be scaled. And there might be an idea that starts in a small community that could be scaled in a larger community, the opposite side of the planet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would love to be traveling right now, but, I think being in a place like Puerto Rico where things are happening and I'm seeing entrepreneurs do interesting things is just as good.
So I think a key part we had chatted, and you just hit on that idea of sharing ideas across cultures. So I know you're launching Border Breakers, which you can get into in a second. Maybe let's pivot the conversation to what have you seen work other places? What have you seen work here? Just in general, like idea sharing for like an entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Right. So I lived in Lebanon. I lived in Beirut, Lebanon for about 6 months, 3 years ago. I was
Nice.
based in London, but I was spending a lot of time in Lebanon developing this program with entrepreneurs there. And it was focused on creating the understanding and the mindset that a company doesn't need to necessarily be a social enterprise or a nonprofit in order to have a positive impact in their community. Their product or offering doesn't need to be social good, right? It would be great if it was, but it doesn't need to be. Companies can make simple tweaks in their operations and in their hiring practices or in their culture that has a tremendously positive effect on their community. And then I think if they were broadened out that way and their messaging was made known to impact specific investors, they would have a larger pool of funding to reach out to beyond just the normal VCs that they might go after. So that was one of the reasons we decided to do that in Lebanon, because Lebanon is probably 3 to 4 years behind the United States in terms of technology and access.
Sure.
But there's still a burgeoning ecosystem there. And again, like Puerto Rico, I just love that these people never quit.
Yeah.
They just keep going. I mean, they have, I felt very safe in Lebanon, but at any given time, something could happen if a country decides to just like attack one of the political leaders there. And it hasn't been that long since the last civil war took place there. And so I was living there, and I met a number of entrepreneurs doing interesting things. I met a woman that has a company called Proximy. So she developed an AR platform that allows medical professionals working in conflict regions or in war zones to receive training from people in other locations and guidance. And obviously very, very useful in a war zone or conflict region, but that could be useful anywhere. That could be useful right now. That could be useful if there's a second wave of COVID, which many experts are predicting there will be. We may need to open up more buildings to expand hospital services. It would be great to be able to communicate with people that aren't necessarily on the ground floor with them, but still have access to that training or guidance. And so I love that idea just because of how universal it is. In Puerto Rico, a lot of you watching from Puerto Rico are probably familiar with a company called Produce, and then with a company called UVA. I love this story because UVA was founded by it's a sister and brother team, right? So, Produce, the subscriptions for Produce and UVA, they're both delivery services. They've spiked in the last 4 weeks to 8 weeks since lockdown began. And UVA was mainly delivering food from restaurants, but they expanded their services to essential needs, so pharmaceutical needs, things like that. They even deliver exercise equipment. I got a yoga mat from them. So they're, for obvious reasons, because people they can go out now, but weeks ago it wasn't as loose. It's loosening up more. And then Produce, all of the produce that they deliver comes from local farms here in Puerto Rico, and they're an island-wide service. So is UVA. And so since this uptick is happening, we're starting to wonder, would it be possible for Puerto Rico to be more self-sufficient and self-sustaining and not rely on 80% of imports to keep going? So, I mean, I think that's a possible model. If that actually comes to fruition, that could be beneficial for other islands or just other communities that depend on places outside of their environments to live and to eat.
That's interesting. So on Friday, we're interviewing Major Dream, who's an agropreneur, and it's that same idea of connecting the farmers to the people that are looking to buy the products, and what a good solution. It helps to cut down the import, if that's what you meant.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of ideas like that sprouting up. I think probably there are a lot of ideas already in the oven baking right now around the world around how local communities can be more self-sufficient and not rely on cities or not rely on imports, because the supply chain system is not working for us.
Exactly. You keep the money in the community We watched a good documentary called Tomorrow recently, which kind of hit on how other communities have been able to do that successfully, so you can model, which kind of ties into what you've done with all your traveling, is you've seen what works and what doesn't work. And, I know it's better, and we've had this conversation, to focus on the kind of like the solution mindset of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of my main goals as a writer the past couple of years has been to really create, like you read in my bio, cultural understanding among people in different parts of the world,
Sure.
right? So before I spent time in Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, where else was I? Morocco. I spent some time in Dubai. Dubai is a different animal than the other countries I just listed, but plenty of amazing things happening in Dubai as well. But before I started spending time in those countries in the Middle East and North Africa, I had no idea that how much ingenuity there was there. I had no idea that there were refugees building startups. I had no idea that there were all these coding boot camps for people that were displaced from their homes because of the Syrian war. I had no idea. And these people are risking their lives doing this. I wrote a story for Forbes Women about 3 young women in Syria, in Aleppo, that were, while I was on the phone with one of them, she was on her way to go lead a hackathon in Aleppo. And this was just a few weeks after there was a major explosion in that city. This is at the height of what was happening, what has been continuously over the years been happening in Syria. And I said, how are you not scared? And she said, there's always a positive impact to crisis. And this is it.
Interesting. You're right. So it's more of a mindset, looking for that positive impact.
Yeah.
This is good. So maybe pivoting a little bit, storytelling. I know that's a big part of how you've helped clients in the past. I know you're launching an e-course coming up on the subject. Everybody's at home and looking to reinvent themselves. And one of the key elements that we've discussed is the importance of having clarity in your brand, and, having that, proliferate out so people understand what you're about. Maybe tell people some background on that and a tip.
The background is, I don't really know how to do anything else other than storytelling. I've had other kinds of jobs outside of journalism and producing, but everything leans on my ability to craft and tell a story and sound convincing.
Sure.
I think the main thing that is important for entrepreneurs right now is to be very clear on what the problem is that you're addressing. And there's different ways to pitch. I've judged a lot of pitching competitions all over the world. A common way that many viewers are probably familiar with is to start with the problem, and then to go into how your company's addressing it, and then to go into more background of the company, the projections, the team, all that really important information that investors want to know. But sometimes I see people pitch and they start with who they are and what they're doing. I don't necessarily think that's wrong, but you have to be really clear on the problem. And something else that's really common in the startup world is there are really great ideas out there, but there's solutions looking for problems. Now, I don't always think that's a bad thing, because that means you're being forward thinking and being futuristic. And quite frankly, as the current time is showing us, we need to be thinking that way.
Yes.
But an investor that's going to put down money right away just wants to know how much you believe in what you're doing, and what's the real problem? What is the need right now?
Sure.
Not 2 years from now, what is the need right now? So one of the main things that I do when I'm helping companies craft their company narrative for internal purposes is just really understanding the problem inside and out, knowing the problem's story. And then we get into, what are your competitors doing? It's really important to know their story as well as your customers. And then you can get into what your story is and how you're different, what your secret sauce is, what your creative or your technological advantage is, and then the sky's the limit. Just keep going as far as you can go. And then we extract and pull the key messaging and positioning points, and then those go into your pitching materials, your blog, your thought leadership articles,
your social media content.
Exactly.
But
there needs to be a general base. I meet so many founders who are so brilliant. They don't have time to be thinking. They need to be thinking about how to continue making the product better, or they need to be securing their funding. And so maybe they have an internal team to figure out their story, but maybe they don't.
Yeah.
But sometimes, people don't need someone consistently holding their hand, giving them content strategy advice. They just need the framework of how to figure it out themselves, and then they can go. So that's why I'm creating this course, is for people that actually as long as you give us some guidance and a blueprint, we can figure it out from here. We don't need to have a call with you every week. I'm happy to do that with clients that hire me for that, but there are a lot of people there that are very creative and they can do it internally.
That's good. And so you're right, the class is kind of, and I've already been through a lesson. We've talked about this some and fill in the blanks on this. The class is going to be a great way for people to just go through a step-by-step process of, identifying, the problem, the solution, their client, maybe fill them in on what they can expect on that front and what somebody would leave after taking it.
Well, you can expect by the end of the course, you will have a fully written, fleshed out narrative for your company. So you will have positioning and messaging key points about your problem, about your about your competitors, about your secret sauce, and why you're the best option in the market, right? So in addition to the messaging, here's who we are, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. That's the messaging, right? But what is your position against everything else going on? What is your position against what's happening in your sector? What is your positioning against your competitors? And then we can also, there's a bonus class I'm doing on thought leadership. I'm not a big fan of the word thought leader, but I don't know what else. I don't know what else to call it. I want to create an entirely new vernacular for the whole content marketing industry, though. But there we get into a lot of the fact that a lot of people come to me or other journalists and ask, I want to be a contributor for Forbes or Inc., or I want to have a piece written in another publication, or I want to be an expert commentator on CNBC on topics pertaining to my industry. And so we'll be diving into what topics really are most suitable for you to be talking about based on your position as a CEO or founder of your company. And we'll be looking at ways you can look at what's going on in the world, top headlines, news, or other topics that you would like to have receive more attention, and looking at, is it really aligned? Is this topic really aligned for you to be talking about? Or is there a way we can make it align with that? And then we go into what is your tone of voice? What is your perspective? Sometimes when I work with startups, they have a great company story, they have a great product, but then when it comes to the thought leadership part, we need to work on, great, but what is your perspective on what's happening in your industry? That's when you become an influencer. That's when people start to really care what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Focusing on the industry. Interesting.
And how do you make that story? How do you make that content? How do you project it? How do you create it in a way that is very true to your company's brand, and you're able to get your message out there without being super self-congratulatory or super self-promotional, right?
Yep.
There's a tasteful way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it in native advertising and things like that, but some, or we just see like a logo. Like when BuzzFeed was doing, I think BuzzFeed is still doing this, those native advertising articles, they'll do maybe Downy, the paper towel company, is the sponsor. And then so the blog post is focused on like 15 ways to clean your house in a fun way, right? And then the article never once mentions Downy, but it's going into the fact that Downy's a quicker picker upper and can help you like speed along your day. And I'm totally making this up.
But it's a good perspective to give the analogy.
Or if there's like an 80s, I don't know, some kind of company that wants people to feel nostalgic about the 1980s, right? And then they're the sponsor of that piece of content. And so then all the content's going to be focusing on like the top 7 80s movies to really make you feel at home and take you back to simpler times or whatever. Like fine, if your brand is a company that's promoting 80s paraphernalia or something, it's okay to be talking about that kind of thing.
Sure. Interesting. Okay. So pivoting to kind of wrap things up, and how do you see the world economy? How do you see things transitioning? I'll leave it broad, but how do you see the road ahead? Is there industries that people should be going into or out of? Like how do you see things unfolding?
I have a very blurry vision. I shouldn't say that. I don't know the road ahead 6 months to a year from now. We already are seeing signs and data, though, of industries that are going to do well during amid COVID and post-COVID, or when we go back into COVID, if there's a second, third wave, whatever happens, depending on access to invention of vaccine and access. Telehealth, big, is obviously huge. Any video streaming, video conferencing services. Online well-being, yoga, fitness, spiritual healing, somatic therapy, EFT therapy. We're seeing a big boom in that, which is great. More online access to things that people can do in their home, obviously. So these are all pretty obvious. But I mean, there is data. I don't have the exact stat with me, but I did see data recently that Y Combinator has received an uptick in applications for their next application process.
Nice.
Which is interesting because I'm curious, are these startups are they designed in response to COVID? Like, are these new ideas that just came up the last 2 months, or are these startups that have been, chugging along and they're like worried about COVID maybe?
Exactly.
But in terms of the economy, what I would like to see is conversation. Initially conversation. I say conversation because I don't know the actual solution yet or how to implement it. But I know that the systems that we've been operating under don't work. Clearly, our healthcare system is not designed for everybody. And the reason it's collapsed is because everybody's getting hit.
Got it.
And it's not designed for everybody to really be well with it. Maybe that was the intention at one point, but we still don't have universal healthcare in the United States, and other countries do. Right. So clearly our healthcare system needs disruption and a total redesign, a totally new blueprint. Healthcare education system is being totally redesigned. My mother's told me that she saw something on the news the other day that people were talking about how education is never going to be the same after this. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's clearly very different now. And there are things to be learned from it, how different it is. Maybe we could do interesting things with that, like going back to the whole concept of breaking down cultural borders through innovation and ideas, like giving a child access here in Puerto Rico, giving them access to a classroom in London, or France, to see what they're talking about or what they're doing. We have the technology to do these things, whether that's through VR or just teleconferencing. There's a company, I can't remember the name of it, but they actually build these portals. And so you can see the full body. So they can give a violin lesson. Like somebody in Washington, D.C. can give a violin lesson to people in Syria. No, it's just a big portal. You go into this crate, and then it's fully, you can see. So it's different than Skype in that you get the full body experience and you get more of a feel for the people. But anyway, going back to the whole systems issue that I'm looking at. So healthcare, education, financial, obviously not working at all. Energy needs to change. We've known that for many years. Climate change. So the world has been on lockdown collectively, and we've all been feeling like we're losing something, whether we've lost loved ones to the disease, or we know people who have lost loved ones. We lost jobs, losing money, losing food, losing access to just social, losing access to physical contact, seeing people. We've all lost something, right? So the world, I think, in many ways has been collectively grieving. So we've been on pause, but what I want to know is, are the decision makers, the leaders in government, or the people that have built the economic systems or that keep them running, are they stopping and saying, okay, people in their homes are going inward and going through transformations or reinventing themselves, like you said. Now is the time to reinvent our global systems, our economic systems, our healthcare systems. That's what I really want to see, because there's a lot of initiatives taken that specific industries do, like different sectors, like in the tech sector. There's a lot of initiatives happening where there's unconscious bias programs, or there's more paternity or maternity leave, or there's programs done so that to build more of a pipeline for women, to get more women in tech, right? And great, we can do that, but nothing is going to fundamentally change unless the systems we're operating under change. And the thing is I think we've been operating in a way where we're serving the system. The systems are supposed to be serving us. And that's where the whole power of consumerism comes into play. I want people to start optimizing their power as a consumer more. That's another conversation, but so I don't know where things are going to go, but that's where I would like them to go. As I just want to know, is the government having these conversations? Like, are healthcare companies having these conversations, or are they still too much in reactive mode because none of us were prepared for the pandemic?
Yes, that is a valid question. And I think what you're pointing towards is us as individuals are the solution by our buying choices and what we do with our time and how we are learning and how we're keeping a broader cultural perspective, if I'm hearing you, because with that, you have fresh ideas and you have more tolerance.
Yeah, and I think the more that we're able to have the space and time to go inward and heal and transform, whatever word you want to use for what you've been doing at home.
Yep.
Some people are probably going crazy. But the more we're able to do that, the more our vision of what is just and sound and fair and freedom, the more that evolves and changes. So I think we will tolerate, we start to just, our tolerance level for anything less than something that serves everybody will start to just decrease and more. So the more that just, because people say, well, what can I do? I'm not an economist. I don't know I'm not going to go lobby in DC for how to change our healthcare system, right? But your power as a consumer, and then just your power as an individual who's choosing to do internal work and to be more conscious about how you're treating yourself, how you're treating the planet, how you're treating others. There's no way that a person can go through that process without also looking at the way the world is being run and starting to question it.
I think that's key. Yeah. You're going to leave me and many others watching.
I'm writing
I'm
writing an article about where I'm featuring 4 different economists from different parts of the world and how they think our economic systems would be better. How would they like to see them be transformed?
Is that or can you fill us in on kind of what you're hearing and feeling so far of, with the articles?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but I will say that focusing less on GDP and more on well-being is a theme.
Got it.
The women economists that I interviewed both said that. The men didn't go into that, but I didn't tell any of them who I was talking to. I just said I'm featuring some economists in this but I learned I want to hang out with economists more. They know their stuff.
That's good.
Yeah.
Interesting. So maybe kind of leaving, this is an unusual maybe way to wrap up the conversation. In our conversations, a key theme that's came up is gratitude and its importance. And we're talking about well-being in this time. And many people out there are probably like us, it's an interesting time and your mind can go in different directions. What role does gratitude play in kind of your life and kind of how things have developed, and just kind of leaving it open?
Yeah, for me, I think from my perspective, gratitude personally is the only way I can really be present and move forward. If I'm not in gratitude, I'm stuck or I'm running over the past or I'm worried about the future. And so just to give you some context about it, the last 2 weeks, I was really working on having more acceptance for certain things happening in my life and just for everything that we're all going through together in the world because of the pandemic. And so I reached a pretty good place of acceptance before I came to Via Vista last week. And then over the weekend, I reached a really deep place of gratitude. Gratitude was the next level. And I felt it in my body. Yeah. And I'm a big believer that when you feel a mindset shift in your body, then you're not able to go back to the old way. Your mind might want to go back there because of habit. But once we feel something in their body, we're actually transforming. Sure. Our DNA is actually changing. And so that I realized, I started to see everything much more clearly. I started to just feel great about the present and not worried about the future, just gradually taking things day by day, and then, being in it and beyond acceptance, just being grateful for the things that I do have right now, because, there's plenty of people outside of our community that are starving, that are they're living in refugee camps. I mean, the most marginalized groups are anytime there's a problem going on in the world, the most marginalized groups are hit by it harder. Right. And so while I've, been grieving and feeling heartbroken in many ways, like many people, still had it okay. Like I'm able to work from here, we're remotely, we're able to communicate and to connect with people online. We're pretty good. We're so, it's not that bad. I mean, it's an adjustment and it's frustrating. Yeah. But it doesn't have to feel torturous. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, very good. I appreciate you coming on. This will be, a lot re-looped on YouTube if you missed portions of it. We'll be tuning in weekly, so look forward to that. Check out the link below for her stellar storytelling course. You're definitely going to want to look into that. It's going to be coming out soon. And yeah, I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, very good.